Mom, there's a man pointing a gun at me. I could hear my daughter's voice on the phone, eerily calm, almost too calm. Don't worry, Mom, I've got this. But you might want to get home before this guy makes tonight's news. My heart leapt. I bolted from the conference room, leaving my stunned colleagues behind. We had moved into Oakwood Estates just 2 weeks earlier. Who could have imagined that the homeowners association here would greet my daughter with a gun barrel? They had no idea who they were dealing with. And neither did I, yet. If you've ever faced a tyrannical HOA or neighborhood bully, drop a comment below. I want to hear your stories of absurd rules and intimidation. But let me start at the beginning. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 45, a consumer rights attorney in Chicago. After a surprisingly peaceful divorce following 20 years of marriage, I finally bought my dream home in Oakwood Estates, expecting serenity. The brochure promised manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and a quiet, welcoming community. What it didn't mention was the micro-kingdom of rules, armed enforcers, and petty tyrants disguised as neighbors. Our first day in the house was calm until the doorbell rang. A woman in her 50s, clutching a thick binder, introduced herself as Karen Wilson, the HOA secretary. "Welcome to Oakwood Estates, Mrs. Mitchell," she said, handing me the binder. "Here's your welcome package and rulebook. Please review it to avoid incidents." Her voice suggested punishment far beyond simple fines. I smiled politely and took the binder, noting her nervous glances before she hurried back to her car. Later, I flipped through the binder, my attorney's eye catching numerous questionable rules. No street parking between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Limits on gatherings, mandatory quarterly meetings, fines doubling for repeat offenses, and the most absurd of all, a provision letting HOA representatives enter my home with 24-hour notice for compliance inspections. My blood ran cold. Property rights? Clearly trampled. Weeks later, my daughter Jessica arrived for her vacation. At 32, she was brilliant, level-headed, and accomplished. Few knew she was an FBI tactical team commander with a decade of high-stress experience. I was thrilled, not only to have her for company, but to get her insight on security upgrades. The very next morning, while sipping coffee, a small elderly neighbor approached. "You must be Sarah's daughter. I'm Linda Thompson, the neighborhood gossip," she whispered theatrically. She warned us of Richard Connors, the HOA president, and his loyal enforcer, Doug, a man obsessed with his self-made badge. Her conspiratorial tone made me like her instantly. The intimidation began subtly. A parking violation appeared the next day, a bright orange notice slapped under my wiper blade. Only 2 inches over an invisible line, yet the fine was $50. Jessica's trained eyes immediately noticed the signature, D. Peterson. Security enforcement, not even an official HOA role. Before long, I received a call from Richard himself, warning me to adjust my attitude or leave the neighborhood. The next HOA meeting was mandatory. Attendance would reveal the full scope of their control, but little did they know. I wasn't alone. Jessica and I arrived at the community center, discovering about 40 residents under Richard's oppressive gaze. The meeting felt more like a dictatorship than a homeowner gathering. When residents raised questions about finances, security, and enforcement, Richard dismissed them outright, wielding his authority like a weapon. When my turn came, I calmly laid out the legal violations in their rulebook, pointing out infringements on property rights and state statutes. Silence fell over the room. Richard's face reddened, his control faltering. The power dynamics were shifting, and not in his favor. After the meeting, secret support emerged. Karen Wilson discreetly passed me a note. "They're watching." Cameras and microphones everywhere. Meanwhile, Doug continued his intimidation tactics. Red X marks on our lawn, confrontations and threats, all met with calm calculation from Jessica. Her skills turned every intimidation tactic into an opportunity for gathering evidence. We soon uncovered a deeper scheme: selective enforcement, harassment, and systematic property targeting for profit. It wasn't just bullying. It was organized real estate fraud masked under HOA governance. With the help of neighbors, Jessica's FBI contacts, and Karen's insider knowledge, we began documenting everything. Every violation, every threat, every financial irregularity. The stakes escalated quickly. Doug eventually arrived at Michael's house, gun in hand, demanding we take down security cameras that were fully legal. Jessica confronted him calmly, analyzing his stance, his weapon, and his intentions. Within moments, she disarmed him with precise efficiency, neutralizing the threat before anyone else could act. The police arrived minutes later, taking control of the situation. Richard, witnessing his enforcer's arrest, realized he had underestimated us. But this was only the beginning. The following days brought a barrage of violation notices, vandalism, and continued intimidation. Each act only strengthened our resolve. With the FBI investigating, a community rallying, and evidence mounting, the balance of power was about to shift dramatically. As the investigation deepened, the full extent of Richard Connor's schemes began to unfold. Karen, the cautious HOA secretary, turned out to be an invaluable insider. She provided USB drives filled with meticulous financial records, exposing nearly $500,000 siphoned from HOA funds into shell companies linked to Richard's relatives. Her mother had once lived in Oakwood Estates, and Karen had witnessed firsthand the harassment, unexplained vandalism, and financial manipulation that forced families to sell at a fraction of market value. Her courage in documenting these abuses was the key to uncovering the pattern. Jessica and I immediately began piecing everything together. The pattern was unmistakable. Minor violations would escalate gradually, fines would grow, and small acts of vandalism or intimidation would push targeted homeowners to either comply or sell. By the time a homeowner realized what was happening, their property was already in the crosshairs of Richard's real estate network. Karen confirmed our suspicions. 26 families had already been pushed out, their homes bought at discounted prices by shell companies tied to Richard's brother-in-law. This was not just HOA corruption, it was systematic exploitation. With evidence mounting, Jessica contacted her colleague, Agent Thomas Davis at the FBI, requesting background checks and surveillance support. Meanwhile, we documented the escalating intimidation. My car was vandalized with the words "comply or leave," and Doug's threatening presence became a constant. But with Jessica's FBI training, we remained steps ahead. She installed hidden security cameras, mapped escape routes, and set up recording systems that could capture every move without being noticed. The situation reached a critical point when Jessica received a text from Michael. Doug was at his door, armed. Time froze. I called the local police, emphasizing the potential for an armed standoff, but resources were thin. 15 minutes could have been an eternity. Jessica moved instantly, confident and precise, confronting Doug before any harm could come to us. The standoff was over in seconds. Jessica's skill and composure disarmed Doug, immobilizing him while Michael secured the weapon. She instructed me to inform the responding officers that the suspect was detained, ensuring that when law enforcement arrived, the situation was under complete control. The officers were impressed by her professionalism and calm command of the scene. Doug was arrested and the threat of immediate violence was neutralized. Richard Connors arrived on the scene shortly afterward, furious and desperate. He attempted to assert control, claiming Doug acted on his behalf and insisting it was a misunderstanding. But the police blocked him firmly, and Jessica's presence left no room for negotiation. Every move, every word, had been documented and transmitted to federal agents. Richard's position was rapidly collapsing. In the days that followed, we were bombarded with violation notices, 17 in total, accusing us of unauthorized gatherings, landscape modifications, and even the very cameras that had protected our home. Someone destroyed the flowers in our garden, sending a clear message. Intimidation was still their tactic. But now we had evidence, neighbors rallying behind us, and federal attention on Richard's operation. The harassment that once isolated us became the rallying point for change. We formed the Fair Homeowners Alliance, bringing together neighbors who had suffered similar abuses. With Karen providing insider documentation and Michael sharing security footage, we built a case demonstrating financial mismanagement, selective enforcement, and intimidation. The community united. Residents who had been too scared to speak now found courage in numbers. Petty tyrants, it turns out, are much weaker when their victims refuse to be intimidated. The emergency HOA meeting was the climax of this resistance. Richard tried to regain control, but the momentum had shifted. Armed with evidence and legal support, we challenged his authority, exposing financial irregularities and the pattern of targeted harassment. Karen, finally confident in the safety of our alliance, revealed her records. Shock rippled through the room as residents realized the full scope of the deceit. The vote of no confidence passed overwhelmingly, removing Richard and the board from power. But Richard was cornered, and cornered men are dangerous. As we returned home, the broken lock on our front door and his threatening voice reminded us that the fight wasn't entirely over. Jessica, calm and unshaken, positioned herself strategically, ready to handle any threat. Her professionalism, combined with a careful recording setup, ensured that any aggression would be documented and reported. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Richard believed he could intimidate us, underestimate our preparation, and maintain control. But he had miscalculated entirely. A seasoned attorney, an FBI tactical commander, and a united community were far beyond his reckoning. The final showdown would reveal the full extent of his criminal network and the consequences of underestimating the people he sought to bully. The next morning, we returned home cautiously, aware that Richard Connor's desperation made him unpredictable. As we approached the front door, it swung open, and there he was, sitting in my favorite armchair, a handgun casually resting on his knee. Darkness framed him, but his presence radiated menace. Jessica assessed the situation instantly, noting every exit, position, and potential threat. Calmly, she whispered to me, "Stay behind me. Watch his hands." Richard smirked, confident in his perceived control. "We need to talk privately," he said, his tone smooth but threatening. "No one calls the police." His arrogance was palpable. Jessica stepped forward, exuding calm authority. "Breaking and entering is a federal crime," she reminded him. "Add that to brandishing a weapon and you're looking at serious consequences." Richard laughed, but it was hollow. He knew that Jessica's calm demeanor masked lethal precision. He attempted to negotiate, holding up a document demanding a retraction of all HOA violations and an immediate sale of our property, offering a bribe of $50,000 above purchase price. "Sign now," he said, gesturing with the gun. "Refuse and things get complicated." Jessica tilted her head, analyzing him with the precision of an FBI tactical commander. "Your threats are exactly why you're in this mess," she said coolly. With fluid, practiced motion, she disarmed him, stepping inside his line of fire while controlling his wrist and removing the gun. In one seamless movement, she twisted his arm, forcing him face down on the floor, immobilized. Michael carefully retrieved the weapon, avoiding fingerprints, while I contacted the police to report the armed suspect detained. The response was immediate. Officers arrived within minutes, securing Richard and taking Doug away in cuffs. Jessica revealed her FBI credentials, and the officer's demeanor shifted from cautious to professional respect. Doug was charged for discharging a firearm and threatening civilians, while Richard's attempts to leverage connections with the police and city officials crumbled under the weight of evidence. With both men removed from the neighborhood, we finally had a chance to restore Oakwood Estates. The HOA board was restructured under interim leadership, Linda Thompson as president, Karen as treasurer, and Michael heading a newly formed transparency committee. Security systems were standardized, financial records posted online, and open meetings became mandatory. Our neighbors, once isolated and fearful, began to reclaim their community. The small, humorous sign we placed where Doug had painted his red X, "This area protected by FBI, think twice before pointing guns," became a symbol of resilience and vigilance. Children played freely again on the lawns, and neighbors shared stories of how the intimidation had affected them, forming bonds that had been impossible under Richard's reign. The larger HOA fraud case caught the attention of national media, prompting legislative discussions on transparency and governance in homeowners associations. Jessica extended her leave to help reorganize the HOA, applying her FBI expertise to ensure accountability and proper checks on authority. Meanwhile, I served as a legal consultant, rewriting covenants and securing homeowners' rights against arbitrary enforcement. 3 months later, the courtroom proceedings concluded. Richard and Doug faced federal charges for organized fraud, intimidation, and weapon violations. Jessica testified, her uniformed presence and command leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the offenses. The judge sentenced Richard to 15 years in federal prison, with full financial restitution to affected residents. Doug received 8 years, mitigated slightly by his cooperation. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. As we left the courthouse, reporters asked how it felt to take down a tyrant. I reflected on the fear, anger, and eventual unity of our neighbors. "It feels like reclaiming the power to protect what's yours," I said. Jessica added, "And sometimes it requires a community, not just an individual." and maybe knowing when a gun is aimed at the wrong person. Back in Oakwood Estates, life had transformed. The newly elected board operated transparently, residents spoke freely, and the promise of community was finally fulfilled. On our restored front lawn, the FBI protected sign served as a lighthearted reminder of vigilance and courage. Sometimes to confront a bully, all it takes is a determined mother, a daughter with exceptional skills, and a neighborhood ready to stand together. And for Richard Connors, the moment he pointed a gun at the wrong person became the ultimate turning point in his downfall.